Today, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Nick Bloom to the Digital HR Leaders podcast in a special episode that we're recording at the Global Executive Retreat in Colorado. Nick, welcome to the show. Before we get started, can you give a brief introduction to you, your background and your work?
Yeah, thanks very much for having me on. So you can hear I'm British. Well, I guess we're both British.
We're both British.
We're both Brits in America. I came over to Stanford University about 20 years ago in 2004. I have been working on a number of things, particularly working from home throughout that period. To be honest, work from home was kind of quiet. It was not a big topic until March 2020. And then it just exploded. Yeah. And then, all I've been doing for the last three and a half years is talking to managers, talking to firms, collecting data, running projects, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But my world right now feels very much like focused on how to make this work.
Yeah, and it's such a big topic. I mean, it's a big topic that we're talking about today and tomorrow at the retreat. Really, right. Some of the actual data behind, remote and hybrid working, but also some of the maybe some of the myths that are around it. And I think we'll talk about some of those in the next sort of 45 minutes or so. So as you said, you've been researching working from home for 20 years. So let's start with a quick history. What was the direction of travel in relation to working from home and how work was changing prior to the pandemic?
So it was slow. So we've pulled together different databases, actually the historic American Time Use Survey and the American Time Use Survey going back to 1965. So incredible, but true. There was some working from home in 1965. It's hard to know how much of it was farm workers and farmers, but it was 0.5%. And what you see from 1965 up until 2019, it's growing. It's actually doubling every 15 years, but the base is really low. Yeah. So what's going on? I'm 50. I was in, my parents both worked from home a bit in the 80s. So that's the era of, pieces of paper is kind of horrible. 90s, personal computers, it's not a lot better. 2000s, you get the internet. 2010, you get Zoom, Teams, cloud computing. So by the time you get to 2019, we have most of the basic technology we have now, but we're not doing it that much. There's about 5-6% of days. And then at 2019, bang, we get this explosion in 2020. And then ever since then, it's been falling. And the last year of 2023, it's kind of flatlined. And, my prediction is when Nike swoosh, and eventually it's going to go back up again. But certainly the last 3 years fell, but now the last year we are flat. The return to office trend is over.
So we can almost call it the new normal then.
It is the new normal. Yeah, I have this discussion over and over again. We've now seen 9 months of just flat data. So I think we're pretty confident to see it's the new norm.
Yeah, so let's talk a bit more about the pandemic and the impact it had. Obviously, it led to the biggest work from home experiment in history. Yeah. What were the main learnings from the period, and what will be the lasting impact, you think, on work?
I think the biggest learning is work from home works. So if you go back to 2019, which is really not that long ago, the sayings were like shirking from home, working from home, or working remotely working. People were very cynical. Take-up rate was really low. Most organizations, you may have 1 or 2 people work from home, but they're normally on some special side deal they've cut. Now 2019, you've only got to go through 3 years now to 2023, and it's completely different. So it's absolutely standard. It's part of the big 3 now benefits, which you have healthcare, pension, and work from home. And people go through them, and I talk to recruiters, and they say, this has got to be part of the package. Yeah. You've got to pay 10-20% more. So that is permanent. So now I think the thing is just to accept that's permanent. It will evolve a little bit going forwards. Any revolution, think of the steam engine, the electric engine, the computer, the internet, takes time to filter through. AI, it's going to be a slow process, but it's certainly a permanent revolution. I think the dust is settling. And so that's one, in my mind, that's one of the big silver benefits out of silver cloud out of the pandemic, in the sense that pretty much everything else has been truly awful.
Yeah. And I guess once people experience it, both from an individual level, but also from a managerial level, it's like, okay, people actually are working, they are getting stuff done, and they are collaborating. Maybe it's sometimes better to collaborate face to face. It depends on different things, I guess. And and some are sort of leading on to where we're going now, I guess. Some are referring to the post-pandemic world of work as the hybrid era. Where are we now with remote, hybrid, and in-person work? And you talked about it kind of flatlining over the last year. What are the main trends that you are seeing around this?
Yeah, so why don't I'm going to be an economist and give you numbers here.
Good.
So, with the podcast, there's a presentation pack you can download with millions of numbers. But here's one number I like a lot, which is if you look at the US labor force, so people aged 20 to 64 that have $10,000+ of earnings in the last year, 60% of these are fully in person. So the largest block are fully in person. Who are they? They're like McDonald's, food service, security, transport, manufacturing, healthcare, etc. People whose, because of clients or equipment or materials, have to come in every day.
Yeah.
There's another smaller group, about half the size, that's hybrid. Hybrid is probably everyone listening. It's everyone pretty much in our world. Almost all Stanford University students, MBAs. These are people who classically would be coming in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, work from home Monday, Friday. I always say, much like ice cream, there's no one flavor of ice cream, but vanilla ice cream, is probably about 20% of sales. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the office is like that for hybrid. It's not the majority, it's the most common. And then there's the third group, which is fully remote. Fully remote itself has two flavors. One is fully remote for college grads, so coders, pretty high-end people. They don't come into the office week by week, but they do seem to meet up every 6-8 months.
Right.
So 6-8 weeks. So they might meet every other month in Barcelona or New Mexico or something. And the other half of fully remote is people that just never meet. They're like on call centers, on hourly paid or on data entry and stuff, and you're just hiring them per hour, per person. But that's really, there is a continuum spread. The biggest group by count is hybrid at 30%. They are definitely the biggest group by wage bill because they're about 50% of the wage bill because they're so much more highly paid.
Yeah. And you're actually producing every month. Is it WFHresearch.com? If I got that right. Every month, sort of data that you and your colleagues are collecting on a regular basis. So you're actually able to talk about the pattern that we've seen over all the way back to when you started studying this, but particularly since the pandemic, month by month. So that flat line.
It's clear in the data.
You expect that to, and you talked about maybe a swoosh of it going up as well. And why do you think it will be that the Nike swoosh?
Yeah, so to start off, all economists love to show off about their data. This is like, the time that they get really excited is like, racehorse owners and their races, economists and their data. So we discovered in May 2020, the pandemic was just this completely new thing. The federal government, statistical agencies were not equipped to deal with this. They're great. I work a lot with them, but they cannot turn on a dime. So we set up the monthly survey of workplace attitudes and arrangements. We surveyed 10,000 Americans. We refined it. It's a pretty good survey now. The census finally got their act together in September 2022, about 2.5 years later. They have a bigger sample, but their numbers totally align with ours. So
okay.
I completely trust our numbers. So we have those two. They each come out monthly. We have about 50,000 a month collectively. And what we've seen is the last 6 months, there have been a complete flattening off. Interestingly, the third data source I like, a very different location, is Castle swipe card data. So every time you go into the office, you have to swipe to let in.
Yeah.
And these office swipe card just set up. So pretty sophisticated. They can tell your first time in and your last time out. And so they look at, if that's more than a couple of hours, that's defined as a day, or more than 4 hours, whatever you want. That is running at about 50% of pre-pandemic levels, and it's also totally flat. So it looks like 2023 is the flat bit of the Nike swoosh. As you said, so we've declined because people have gone back to the office. We've flattened out for the last year. What's going forwards? Well, there's two things driving this big boost, and this is really important for managers, particularly senior managers looking 5-10 years out. So one is technology size effects.
Yeah.
So there's a classic in economics going back at least to Schmuckler saying, look, if there's a market for technology and that market gets a lot bigger, suddenly firms rush in and try and make new technologies to make money from that market. And if loads of firms rush into this market to say, hey, we can make some money out of it, the rate of technology progresses rapidly. And work from home is like totally this. It's like the prime example. The number of people work from home has gone up 5-fold, plus a lot of them are pretty high earning. So every hardware firm, software firm, venture capitalist startup I speak to, I live in the Valley, it's like, this is a gold rush, let's get in. And so there's been an explosion of like new products, new software coming to service this market. And we're already starting to see it, from holograms to virtual reality headsets to, laser cameras, all kinds of incredible stuff. Like I was in Zoom with Eric Yu up about a few months ago, and Eric was saying, oh, we have these secret labs working on all this stuff. And I was like, well, what's in these labs? I was hoping you might tell me all the secret stuff. And he was like, well, I can't tell you it's secret. but there is this one thing we're hoping, which is you put your hand into the screen and your hand comes out the other person's screen. And I was like, really? Is that true? That can't be right. And he just laughed at me and then moved on. I was like, I don't know. There's so much stuff going on in these firms.
Teased you.
That teased you. There's something like that happening. So 5-10 years from now, work from home will be much better. I predict, for example, those kind of Star Wars type holograms, so you can holographically plot people up, will exist. I've seen certain firms already starting to work on them. So that is one driver. The other driver is cohort effects. If you look at new businesses now, they're kind of businesses that are run by 30-year-olds, maybe 40-year-olds, and maybe have 50, 100 employees, maybe 5 startups. They are much more remote. And we see that very clearly in our data. The thought is, as these firms mature, some of them go bankrupt, but others for sure will grow and do well and grow into tomorrow's big firms. You're going to be seeing 5-10 years from now, young 50-year-old CEOs that are kind of, the next pin-up CEOs who are going to be making the media and be saying, oh, work from home works well for us. We've been through our trajectory, and all of the employees and all of these companies doing the same.
That leads quite nicely to the next question of mentioning CEOs. There's, and obviously you're collecting data every month on this, and there's a lot of myths around remote and hybrid working. What are some of your favorite myths on this topic, and what does the data say? Because obviously there are a few companies that are outliers. They get a lot of press, when the CEO makes a statement, but actually the norm, as you said, the data is flatlining. So what are some of the favorite myths that you've heard, and maybe how does the data maybe challenge that, perhaps?
Let's think. One myth would be every CEO wants to get their firm back to the office. So I'm going to put CEOs into 2 types. There is sort of like cartoon character CEO. So this is, in the cartoon, maybe muscles are rippling, like, their life is their work. They just ace at everything. They may be the school athlete. They've had job after job. They've just done all the way through. All they do is work. They are so successful, so hardworking. Elon Musk or someone like that has to fall into this category. Maybe Jamie Dimon, maybe David Solomon. They are just super successful CEOs. Those folks, they just see their life as work. Yeah. It's really hard to get inside their head. They are working 100, 120 hours a week. Every day they work. I presume they're having a bath, they're thinking about work, they're biking, they're thinking about work, they're in Uber, they're thinking about work. Probably falling asleep thinking about work. It's like, I'm not sure. They're thinking about work while thinking about another work. It's just like, and so not surprisingly, these people tend to be much happier in the office, and they find they're happier when other people are in the office with them. So this group is calling for a full office return driven more by their own personality than those around you. Then there's the second set of CEOs, which is the remaining 99.9%, who are most other CEOs who are ambitious, are very high performing, but also maybe have married, kids, an outside life, a hobby. Yeah. And they want to work hard, and they're like, in their ideal world, we come in 4 days a week, but they get that their employees want to work from home 1 day a week, and that's helpful for productivity and recruitment. And they're on the more in-office end of most companies, but they're not these hard asses that want in 5 days a week. And so classically, I end up talking to a lot of these places, where about the CHR will say 3 days a week is what we find in the evidence. The CEO says 4. There's often some negotiation hammered out, but at least that's not 5. And at least it may be 3 1 week, 4 1 week, 3 1 week, 4 1 week, something like this, or 4. But we have 2 weeks a year, first 2 weeks of July, when it's really quiet anyway, where everyone gets to work from home. Yeah,
it's that flexibility, isn't it, really? And yeah, I mean, it's the executive thing is interesting, isn't it? Because you recently published or co-authored an article that was in the Harvard Business Review, and actually you published some data around executive sentiment about the future of remote and hybrid work as well, which actually suggested that they think it's here to stay.
Yeah, I mean, we have multiple surveys. One is with the Atlanta Fed and the Chicago University and Stanford University. It's called the Decision Maker Survey of Business Uncertainty. And we survey about 1,000 CEOs a month. These are people we've painfully cultivated up. They know particularly the Atlanta Fed, they're friendly to Stanford or Chicago. We get them on the phone. Eventually we get them on this very short online survey. You should think of these as CEOs or CFOs typically on 200-300 person firms. They're not like Elon Musk is not here. I doubt it. I've not looked, but it's pretty sure he's not there.
You might not get him to complete a survey.
Yeah, exactly. I think he's too busy. But it's probably the guy doing the shoe shine in the airport isn't here either. So what do we ask these guys? We ask them, your thoughts. Where is work from home been 5 years from now, pre-pandemic? Where is it now? Where is it in future? What you see is work from home pre-pandemic is really low. So work from home pre-pandemic goes up to now about 4x. There's a big jump up. We all know that. We wanted to get our norm set up. You then ask them about 5 years from now, and there's a small further rise. And most individuals report an increase. You're like, why? This seems amazing. Like, surely these CEOs are calling for back in the office. When you go talk to them, they see things like, look, I'm going to make a business here. I have to make money. My business is focused on profits and growth. And offering employees hybrid and taking 2 or 3 jobs that could done in person, that could maybe be done fully remotely, is a way to save space, save hiring. I can hire that person in, Mississippi rather than Bay Area. I can hire people I couldn't otherwise get into, 2 or 3 days a week. We introduced this, 4 weeks a year, all remote in the summer. That's been great for getting new grads. Just a whole load of things that they suddenly said, without this, I wouldn't, I'd have a third less employees. So they're very practical. They're very much, I don't have a personal social view on this. It's not like I socially support it, yes or no. They normally quite like it. So they normally quite like to be at home Friday. But their big thing is just making money. And it turns out work from home makes money for companies.
Yeah, and that, as you said, some of the benefits are that opportunity to maybe hire that person with those specific skills that maybe isn't in New York when that's where your company's located. As you said, they might be in Mississippi, but they might really want to work for the company. They might have really, really specialist skills that they can bring and help you effectively be successful. So, obviously, most of the people that listen to this podcast, they're HR professionals, a lot of people analytics professionals as well, and we'll talk a bit more about the people analytics professionals in a minute. But what guidance would you offer to business and HR leaders when it comes to developing, measuring, and evolving their hybrid and work from home policies?
Great question. So let's think. I got three, four. So one is in terms of office design. It's slightly different. And then come back to more directly your question. So I would design the office to be set up to support more meetings and less individual work. I can't get this word, but you'll remember that word now.
We will.
Individual work. So if I think of Stanford campus, we have all these libraries. No one's going there to get books out, but loads of people are using it. That's an individual person workspace. That's actually probably not the kind of workspace you need a lot of in firms. You want instead meeting spaces. I mean, this could be a meeting space. You could put some cover around it. You can make another one here and another one in the other corner. This whole area can make 5 or 6 meeting spaces with partitions so that you wouldn't get too much sound pollution. Another thing would be Zoom booths. So glass side booths that we could put up a ton of them in here. That I can take a Zoom call here and I don't disrupt others. Conference rooms, etc. So making it a place whereby people come in for social work. They feel like when I'm in here, it's good to connect with colleagues and co-workers. In terms of the 3 to-dos, the first is the importance of performance management. So, pre-pandemic, you could manage a firm by walking around. I don't know, am I able to get up here? Can I stand up? Yeah? So, if I'm standing up, walking around, I can tell with David, you're at your desk working because you're here, typing away, kind of Excel's in front of you, Word, something like this, or your head's behind your back, watching Champions League, or you're flirting with the corridor on the colleague on the other side of the partition, or I endlessly see you in the bathroom taking your phone with you doing who knows what. So managing by walking around turns out to be like the best way to tell what's going on. Often in the office, I'm wandering around, I'm walking, I'm seeing what people are doing. That's like 5 out of 10. Yeah. So it's okay. I wouldn't claim it was great, but it's something. Now, if you have employees that are work from home, you can't do that. So what do? What you turn up to having to do is manage, rather than evaluate inputs, you evaluate outputs. So evaluate outputs are going to be 360 reviews, performance reviews, have you met your targets, etc. And when you move to that, it's a win-win for employers and employees. For employers, like managers, you're my manager. It's like, Nick, I'm going to need to meet these 8 tasks. I'm relatively indifferent how you do it. Just get on with it. Yeah. This week, I deliver. You're like really happy. It's good. My deliveries are there. Their quality is there. Everything's fine. I, on the other hand, if I play golf, may say, look, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to play golf Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday morning because it's quiet time and I'm going to make up for it while working on the evenings. Yeah. So I get to make you more use of flexibility. So fact one is like much more performance evaluation system. So more managing outputs rather than managing inputs. So that was one. We're seeing a big drift towards this already. Fact two is more cameras on and Zoom calls. So if you have to have Zoom calls and maybe some people are traveling or some are at home, I think it's important the cameras are on. Our data, we have asked managers and employees the same questions. How do you feel about how your engagement is, whether you have your camera on and off, and how do you feel others' engagement is on if their camera's on and off? And it's completely symmetric. So like amazing, all 4 times you get people having cameras on are much more engaged. So nobody is under any illusions under this. When you have a camera off, you're probably doing something else. Yeah. And everyone's like, I'm doing it, you're doing it, we all know it. There's nothing to hide here. So it would just be a norm to have
the days of conference calls without video.
Yeah, I think that's gone. Now, I get it if you have 200 people. Yeah. Then you don't all want it on, and then that's a broadcast. That's like watching TV, a town meeting. But if you're having kind of 30 or less, and you want contact from the audience. And then the final thing is software to help firms in terms of offices and organization. So in the last few years, there's been a growth of companies that are basically marketplaces for office space. So to give you an example, Strava is the thing that does run tracking and bike tracking. And I know their CEO because he actually weirdly used to have my job ages ago as an assistant professor at Stanford. It's like an office 2 doors down the road from it. And he quit academia, started his own company. And recently he started working with Gable, which are one of 3 of these desk management software companies. What he did is he said, we're going to close down the Denver office. We don't have enough people going there. For folks who want to work in Denver, you go onto the Gable website and you just get an office. Gable's like Expedia. They just have hundreds of offices, tons of them. You look at them, the price, and you have an account, you just pull one off. And he said it's really useful to do this for Strava because they can tell which locations you can close down, get rid of offices, which locations maybe everyone's getting offices and actually need offices and should open them up. There's others, there's that Upflex, there's Liquid Space, My time at McKinsey is always look at 3, when you're procuring these things. Another issue is just desk organization. So there are companies like Eden, Cadence, Scoop that help you organize where people are. Like if I'm coming into work, it's really valuable to know whether you're coming in or you're a colleague. So if I can open up a portal and say, Dave's coming in, I'm going to come in, and if not. So again, it's not super complicated, but it's worth getting this up and running. So those are the 3 big things I would focus on.
So the last one, there's that intentionality then, isn't it? About, okay, I'm coming into the office, I'm coming in because I want to meet with Nick and Stefan, and I'm not going to spend 7 hours on Zoom calls when I come in.
You're precisely right.
And that's back to your first point, is that if you actually design the workplace to actually prompt collaboration and meeting space, but have the Zoom booths as well if people need them, then that's a good way of doing that, isn't it? And we're seeing quite a lot of companies redesigning their workplace. I was at the new booking office in Amsterdam, and they had the luxury of doing a lot of the design for that during the pandemic. Right. So they deliberately thought, okay, we are going to have people from home sometimes, but obviously we want people in the office, and we know that when people come in the office, they want to collaborate, they want to work together. So I mean, it's a pretty impressive building, I must admit. Said little plug there for booking.
The other thing that's interesting is, so a lot of people are using spreadsheets. They're just using kind of low-tech spreadsheets, like write your name on if you're coming on Thursday. So the downside to that, it doesn't alert me. I may actually set up an alert. Is David coming on Thursday? If so, let me know. A, the spreadsheet doesn't alert you that. B, it doesn't alert you that maybe David and X in particular, I really care about coming in. That's my team coming in. The other thing is, more and more companies now are saying, for senior leaders, I get that you don't need to go in the office 3 days a week. There are a number of senior leaders. I see this a lot with law firms. They say, look, the associates, partners, the partners do not need to be in every day. In fact, they hardly need to be in at all. They know their clients. They've had their clients for 15 years. They know the law really well. Yeah. They're beautiful home office. They're really well connected. They're all the lunches, and they're going out. They're just often not going into the office. They're going from home into the lunch place and back for office. They're like, why do I go into the office just to sit around with a bunch of junior associates? And the answer is mentoring. Because the junior mentor, the associates don't learn off the seniors. So another thing that's useful to have in some of these software programs is something that explicitly measures how many times a senior person is in the office when juniors are around, and kind of has a very rough measure of mentoring. And so look, if you come in an office when there's at least 5 juniors, we're going to give you an extra point of mentoring. We're also that's going to be part of your talent development profile.
Yeah, it's a lot of innovation around, really, and that leads quite nicely to the next question. So, similar to the delegates that you'll be talking to later today at the Global Executives Retreat here in Colorado, many of the people listening to this episode work in people analytics. How should companies best survey employees on hybrid and remote working policies and practices? I know we talked about this a couple of weeks ago when we spoke.
I would have thought it's, role means function. So you could probably flip through a few functions. So if you are, a very deep end coder, you're generating stuff that's really yourself, and right at the end you develop the product, or doing that with some marketing campaign, or doing that product development. It may be you're best off being fully remote and coming in once a month to a company.
Yeah.
It may be the firm says, look, we want to live 100 miles from the company. So if something comes up, we can call you in. You don't really want you in Argentina, but you can live 100 miles away. And then there's a problem, we'll call you the night before and you come in that day. And you get to live 100 miles away, but you have to be prepared to kind of drop everything and come in the next day. There's another group of people, I think, who do stuff that doesn't really involve any teamwork, any collaboration, in which fully remote also may work well. I know GitHub, Upwork, etc. have been, very focused on fully remote. They tend to, though, require to meet in person every other month. So you've got to, even with the remote, you've got kind of a mix of fully remote and fully remote, whereby they still want to meet up every 6 months, or 4 months. I have a lot of colleagues at other departments, and I Zoom them all the time, and I don't meet them in any given week, but I certainly met them 3 weeks ago, and it's kind of funny that it shouldn't matter, but seeing them in person, their height, what they look like, how they move, it kind of, when they're on Zoom, you slightly project that onto them, and you feel like the real person rather than the 2-dimension. Then under hybrid, if you have employees that benefit from at least 2 days a week face-to-face, I would say they're probably best fit from hybrid. And face-to-face activities that are better are working patterns that are training, mentoring, discussion, maybe sensitive stuff, mentoring. They're best done in hybrid. And it's important that you do that with people in your office. So again, one other category I forgot is, if there are people in teams, but every team member is in every different office around the world, that seems like kind of a naturally and remote team. Like you maybe meet once every 3 months in Paris, once every 3 months in New York, but day to day, if no one else in your team is there, you maybe are remote. But if your team is on site, you do 3 days a week of in-person meetings, it seems like it's natural to go in, you rearrange to do that, you arrange to have quiet time on.
Listening to what you're saying there, Nick, it seems quite sensible for where possible for companies to kind of delegate decisions around this to the team level. I don't know if you've seen companies doing that.
Yes, there's a mix. So I think on the one hand, if team by teams operate relatively independently, so imagine your sales team, and there's the Europes and Americas and South Americas, and within Europes maybe you break up Germanic and French speaking, etc. That seems a pretty decentralized sales team. And so there's 8 people and they are targeting Italy, and there's no real reason why Italy team should have managed the same way as the UK team. In fact, the UK and Italy have that different work from home practices, different holiday structures, I know, and so they should be different. So that, in that sense, it's perfect. The sense in which it becomes troubling is if you have a matrix organization.
Yeah.
So in a matrix organization, what you may find is, look, I was on sales, but it cuts right across finance.
Yeah.
And finance cut all my markets, and that's connected to engineering, and everyone's connected. There it gets higher. There can be options. So some options is doing it country by country, because the people in the matrix you work with most are in your country. Another option can be just having one global pattern. The downside of one global pattern is actually religious days vary a bit. So Friday, is the holy day under Judaic calendar, and it's Sunday under the Christian calendar, etc. So it's somewhat sensitive. There's days that Muslims do not want to work, and so you've got to kind of figure out where you're going to do there. I see some firms doing a national day. I mean, the other side, by the way, in terms of a national day, is a lot easier to manage and monitor. So just as a CEO, and I talk to CEOs, they find it really hard to know what's going on. When they walk into an office, and some offices are buzzing, and people are there, and some are knowing they're there, some one person says, well, that's their work from home day. It's like, well, every day I work in, there's nobody there. Like, well, every day is their work from home day. It's like that's, while I'm walking around, I'm trying to figure this out. So there is a certain simplicity and ease of execution for everyone having the same day. On the other hand, flipping back, if you choose individual days, and it turns out that people don't overlap, and if you're lucky, they overlap in a way that enables you to save a bit of space. Saving space is a kind of an afterthought. It's generally unpopular because saving space requires clean desks, which people don't like. It has some security implications that people don't like, etc. But if people naturally, in Stanford, for example, in naturally one of the areas, the IT folks are so remote and so sharing desks in a way they're not bothered, and they just kind of pick their own individual desks. That by law of large numbers, we found kind of a bit of a building's just empty. And so we're closing it down so far for environmental and energy reasons, but the thought process is pretty soon we should sublet it.
Okay. A couple of questions, one on pay and compensation, and then one on the 4-day week. This is a topic that can be quite contentious and painful to understand, but how should companies pay fully remote workers? Because we've seen different companies doing different things around that.
Oh, so you picked the most contentious 2 topics that I wrote 2 op-eds and then put them on LinkedIn, and they spurred like hundreds, maybe by now thousands of comments. So I'll tell you what the story was. I'm probably biased in my own telling of it, but I'm not strongly of one mind or another. I just tell the story. So twice in exec ed, I had executives coming to me with really the same story. And I'll tell you just one of them, but the one, it's very similar to what she was saying. So the first one, she says, look, she runs a high-tech firm in Europe, doing very well. She is covering one country. They have about 20 employees in that one country. In that one country, an employee who's actually one of the top performers has moved from a high-cost inland city to a low-cost coastal city that's kind of has a resort. And she's like, fine, I don't care. The guy's still getting his job done. He's still performing really well. I don't lose him for my team. All would be okay, except, well, A, they got regional pay even with their own country, and B, another employee spots this by noticing on his Zoom background that there's some kind of beach, and say there is no beach in Milan. Like, what the heck's going on? And so she's now like, she's stuffed. What is she supposed to do? She's like, on the one hand, she disciplines her highest performing employee, pisses him off, he leaves, probably annoys his friends as well, maybe destroys her group. Or she does nothing, in which case she's basically condoning fraud, and the other employee now is like festering and no doubt going to cause his or her own problems, and the whole thing's going to come down. And I was like, you're just trapped, you're screwed. This is the problem. Having these hyper-local pay systems are causing the manager to become the policeman. And every time employees move, say because their spouse gets another job, their pay scale moves, etc. And so I said it was born out of the pandemic. I get where it came from. The pandemic born this thing whereby everyone was told, look, you're going to keep the pay of the office you've been in full time, just go away and everything will be fine. But of course, people moved, and you suddenly find that someone coming from a high wage pandemic office and a low wage happen to now live next door to each other, and they're paid different amounts. And it seems really unfair. And so then they started to move to paying people for where they live. Ultimately now, when I talk to companies, they are slowly moving to national pay scales. So national pay scales mean within each country, there's one pay for a job.
Yeah.
That would be my support, and that seems to be the majority of you. I ran a big poll on LinkedIn. It's about more than 1,000 people polled. And the last time I looked, I would say it was close. Local was, second, but national was first. After that, my favorite would probably be, my second would be global. Now, depends on the task, but if the task is, say, proofreading a document or data entry, that really doesn't require any local skills, then if you're an American company, it's not obvious why you wouldn't outsource it to Brazil, Philippines, anywhere else. Now, you may say, well, you're taking jobs from Americans. An American would do that job. And that is true in some ways, but a company's role is not to provide jobs. Company's role is to maximize profits and growth. The investors that they owe that own them, want them to do that. So I think it's in their fiduciary duty to maximize, they're not there to kind of provide social goods. If they do, great, but that's not their objective function. And secondly, the US is at full employment. We're actually struggling to find people to fill jobs. So it's not really a problem we're facing, that whoever that isn't going to get that job probably has 10 other ones waiting for them. And you're effectively taking low-skilled jobs out of America and sending them to countries where they're medium-skilled jobs, and actually that's improving development.
Yeah. And then the other contentious topic is a 4-day week. And obviously we're both British. There's been quite a lot of companies actually doing an experiment together around the 4-day week. What are your thoughts around the 4-day week and where it may go?
So it got confused because there are actually 4 versions of it.
Yes.
And I'm going to call 3 of them Muggle versions and 1 of them Magic versions. So why don't I start with the Magic version, which I think is hard, if not impossible, to achieve. I mean, like Harry Potter, most of what we read in Harry Potter doesn't happen. A little bit has by now, by technology, but so the Magic version is we work the same number of hours per day, we work 1 less day a week, and we produce the same productivity. So what's required here is that you can be so much more productive, 25% more productive on the 4 days, that you can offset the loss of the 5th. And one way to get at that is to say, look, I've discovered that in my organization I was wasting a day of completely inactive and pointless activity. Is that possible? Maybe. I don't want to claim that every organization is efficient, and maybe in the public sector and in not very competitive small industries. Having spoke to managers, certainly managers of competitive free market companies, they're pretty insulted and say, I've never been aware of wasting a day a week. If I did, I would cut it out and be much more profitable. That's the kind of thing government firms do that are just completely sleepy. So I think you can find firms that will fit the Magic criteria, but they're sleepy, and it tells you that they were in advance already very inefficient and they had vast amounts of slack to cut out.
Yeah.
Now, what about the 3 Muggle versions? They are feasible and actually have quite a lot of an appeal. So number 1 is what I call shift sharing. So number 1 says, imagine we work, let's say 8 hours a day for 5 days a week. We now say we're going to work 10 hours a day for 4 days a week. We're still working 40 hours. We just done it 1 less day. We just took 4 longer days. It's great. Some people like it. There's less commuting. On the other hand, some other people don't like it. You don't get to see your kids, say, at dinner time and stuff. So, it wouldn't suit me, but it would suit some people. Or there's even 3 hours 3 times a day for 13 hours a day. Second version of the Muggle 4-day week is part-time pay. So I say, David, you know what? You have been getting richer decade by decade because of American productivity growth is about 1.5% a year. And if you look back, Keynes and Nixon and various people said, 30 years from now, we'll be working for 3 days because we'll absorb all the productivity growth. Why are we still working 5? I think you should work 4, take a 20% pay cut. With that money, you can still afford more than what you could have bought 10 years ago or 15 years ago. So just, enjoy the productivity through more leisure. And we should be doing that as a society. Actually, as a society, we should be doing that. I really don't think all this extra hard work should buy us an even bigger TV, an even faster Ferrari, even faster bandwidth. It's like, I don't know what we need it for. Why can't we just take a day off work? So I'm in favor of number 2. Yeah. And then number 3 is work from home on Friday, which has become called as the 4-day week, which is still really working 4.5 days. You're just working a bit more during the week and a bit less on Friday, and you're at home. So 1, 2, and 3 are great. More the better. Requires a bit of flexibility from firms. I just worried that they're getting thrown out. So that's saying throwing the baby out of the bathwater, thrown out with the magic version of number 4, which, sends prickles up every manager's back when they have to think about it.
Well, it's great. I think that might be the first time we've had a Harry Potter analogy on the podcast, so that's really good. And Nick, this is the last question, and this is the one we're asking every guest this series. As we approach the end of 2023, what do you think will be the key priorities for HR as we head into 2024? And you can link it to the whole working from home piece if you want to.
Yeah, better coordination and monitoring of hybrid work, actually. So for HR, their importance has risen a lot. So, to everyone in the HR, it's like an enormous thank you. I've been saying repeatedly to CEOs that because of the importance of performance management and the importance of hybrid, this is really an HR job. You need to put more resources into HR. HR, if it's not already, needs to be an executive role. And in fact, maybe space management needs to sit under HR rather than under the CFO because it feeds him. So HR just needs a bigger role. Companies are much more about people, and that's the folks that run it. Specifically, the jobs that I think are hardest is managing hybrid around coordinating the days, which I think software and data collection is going to help a lot. Getting them to use desk booking, even if you've got enough desks, then getting the book desks provides information. It's like prices. The market economy thrives off prices. There may be too many of some product. We still want to know the prices to know how much each product is worth. It's kind of like our blood, our information is prices. So for firms, you want desk booking to do the same. And then also some of these more flexible tools for closing offices down and using desk aggregators. And then finally, performance management. So 360 review, 6-month feedback sessions, 3-month and some of this stuff's comfortable. You have to give people bad news. I mean, one of the things about meaningful 360 reviews is if you get bad news, it is not a surprise. Like a bad performance review is I say, David, I've got bad news for you. You're like, what? And I tell you, you performed badly, you missed 3 targets. And you're like, I mean, you should have known that months ago.
Of course, yeah.
So performance reviews isn't like, the shit sandwiches, you just dump it all at them. It's like, well, as we've been talking about for a while, here's how I can help you, but be aware that this is a problem. If it doesn't get fixed in the next review, we'll be taking sanctions.
Yeah, very good. Well, Nick, really enjoyed the conversation. Yeah. It's a nice hors d'oeuvre for the session you'll be running later. Right. Can you let listeners know how they can get in touch with you, follow you on social media, and find out more about the research that you're publishing every month? Sure.
So the key thing is LinkedIn. Like many refugees from Twitter, I packed my bag over my shoulders and ran across the road to LinkedIn through the fence. But I'm very active on LinkedIn. Twitter seems to be dying. I also have a website called WFHresearch.com, as in working from home research.com.
Yep.
Between the two of them, we post pretty much everything.
Yeah, and I certainly recommend any listeners that are interested in finding out more about this topic to actually go down there, go every month and download the latest report, because you make them freely available. It's very easy. You click a button and the PDF is there.
And all to say, it's all freely available. You don't have to sign up to anything. No credit card teasers bill. I mean, if you want to sign up a credit card, you're welcome. No, there are no credit card sign-ups. No, you just download it. I mean, that's that basically. Yeah. We're not selling your details.
Well, Nick, thank you very much for being a guest on the Digital HR Leaders podcast.
David, thanks very much for having me on.
Thank you. In this series, we will be speaking to a range of senior leaders who are pushing a data-driven and digital HR agenda. Make sure that you subscribe via your podcast app of choice and also via our YouTube channel for free and regular interviews with the digital HR leaders of the future.